For years, Russia has pointed to Kaliningrad as one of its greatest strengths. This small piece of land, wedged between Poland and Lithuania, has long been seen as a military jewel in the Kremlin's crown. Kaliningrad is cut off from the rest of Russia, yet packed with soldiers, missiles, and weapons meant to send a chilling message to Europe. To Moscow, the exclave was more than just territory. It was a fortress, a threat, and a symbol of power. The Kremlin wanted the world to believe that Kaliningrad was untouchable, yet reality tells a different story. Kaliningrad today looks less like a fortress and more like a vulnerable outpost. Instead of NATO shaking in fear, it is Vladimir Putin who is watching his grip weaken. Beneath the loud speeches and endless propaganda, Russia is showing signs of panic. Kaliningrad's importance has always been tied to geography. It sits in the middle of NATO territory, making it a perfect staging ground for Russian threats. For decades, Russia bragged that missiles in Kaliningrad could strike deep into Europe. But geography is also what makes Kaliningrad fragile. The exclave is completely surrounded by NATO members, and recent years have only increased Moscow's sense of isolation. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia joined NATO in 2004. Finland and Sweden followed after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, further sealing Kaliningrad inside a circle of potential enemies. The land that once looked like a dagger pointed at Europe now looks more like a pocket waiting to be cut off. The Kremlin has responded in its usual way, with words. Putin himself rarely panics in public. Instead, he lets his loyal mouthpiece, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, play the role of messenger. Since 2022, Lavrov has accused NATO and the West of waging war on Russia. He claims that sanctions are war, military aid to Ukraine is war, and even the United Nations has become part of a supposed direct conflict with Moscow. These speeches may sound bold, but they are not really aimed at NATO leaders. They are for the Russian people watching television at home. Inside Russia, this strategy works. 2/3 of citizens rely on state-controlled media, which repeats the Kremlin's talking points day after day. Lavrov's fiery speeches are carefully designed to make ordinary Russians believe they are under siege. The message is clear. The West has attacked Russia, NATO is coming, and every hardship, whether it is poverty, sanctions, or the loss of sons on the battlefield, is a necessary sacrifice. This story keeps people loyal, even when life is getting harder. But Kaliningrad is different. Unlike people in Moscow or Siberia, many in Kaliningrad live closely connected to Europe. They cross the borders for work, shopping, or study. They see with their own eyes how life looks across the line. That makes it harder for the Kremlin's story to stick. When Lavrov rants about NATO monsters, many locals roll their eyes. They do not feel threatened by Europe. In truth, they are frustrated with Moscow. This frustration has been building for years, and it has spilled into the open. In 2023, an unofficial online referendum asked Kaliningrad residents if they wanted independence. Nearly 1/5 of the exclave's population participated, and over 70% voted to break away from Russia. Moscow dismissed the vote as illegal, but the numbers were striking. They revealed a silent majority that sees Kaliningrad's future as something other than a pawn for the Kremlin. The people of Kaliningrad feel closer to their European neighbors than to Russia itself, and some no longer consider themselves Russian in the same way as those living in the heartland. Adding to Putin's troubles is the fact that life in Kaliningrad has only gotten harder. Sanctions have choked trade, tourism has collapsed, and prices have soared while wages stay flat. Every time Lavrov declares that Kaliningrad must be defended from NATO, locals see their own lives worsening and their futures shrinking. For them, NATO is not the enemy. Their real burden is the Kremlin's pride. From a military perspective, Kaliningrad is also far less secure than Moscow wants people to believe. NATO commanders have openly stated that if conflict broke out, they could capture Kaliningrad in record time. That stings the Kremlin because, unlike Russian threats, those words carry weight. NATO's forces are strong, well-prepared, and now positioned on nearly every side of the exclave. Kaliningrad's isolation makes it far more vulnerable than Moscow admits. Russia's response has been to build symbols rather than strength. In 2025, satellite images revealed the construction of a massive radar array in Kaliningrad, just a short distance from Poland's border. On Russian television, it was celebrated as a bold display of power, but to NATO it was a sign of weakness. The radar would not change the military balance. In a real conflict, it would be destroyed before it could even do its job. What it showed instead was Russia's growing paranoia. The Kremlin is pouring money into expensive projects that serve more as propaganda tools than practical defenses. And that gets to the heart of the problem. Kaliningrad is no longer about strategy. It is about pride. To Putin, losing control of Kaliningrad would not only be a military setback, but a personal humiliation. The exclave has long been presented as proof of Russia's strength inside Europe. If it slips away, it will show the world that Russia's power is weaker than it claims. The irony is that NATO does not even need to invade Kaliningrad to achieve that outcome. Instead, all it has to do is wait. As the Baltic states cut themselves off from Russia's power grid, Kaliningrad could face energy shortages. As Europe builds stronger defenses around the region, Russia's hold becomes more fragile. And as the people of Kaliningrad grow more restless, the Kremlin's propaganda loses its grip. The exclave could break away not through force, but through its own people rejecting Moscow's rule. Kaliningrad was supposed to be Putin's ace card in Europe. Instead, it is turning into a weakness that exposes his insecurities. The Kremlin continues to shout, to build, and to threaten. But behind the noise is a simple truth. Russia's grip is loosening. The people of Kaliningrad see another future. NATO sees an isolated outpost, and the rest of the world sees the cracks in Moscow's power. In the end, Kaliningrad is not a fortress at all. It is a mirror reflecting the Kremlin's fears. The louder Putin and Lavrov talk, the more obvious those fears become. And one day, the exclave that Moscow once bragged about may slip away without NATO lifting a finger. That is the real danger for Putin. His so-called secret weapon may prove to be the greatest symbol of his decline.